place of execution, a monument to border war and royal ambition. To the foundation, it had always been something else, an unresolved anomaly hidden beneath layers of folklore, tourism, and fear. I arrived shortly after midnight under the cover of a private structural survey. The public areas had been closed, the roads monitored, and a temporary command post established inside a converted maintenance building beyond the east wall. No uniforms, no marked vehicles, nothing that might suggest the castle was under investigation by an organization most of the world did not know existed. Commander Evelyn Shaw met me inside the outer courtyard. Floodlights had been kept low and directed towards the ground, leaving the battlements in darkness. Her expression told me the operation had already moved beyond a routine haunting assessment. 3 nights earlier, Foundation sensors positioned around Northumberland had detected a short but intense distortion beneath the castle. It had lasted 11 seconds. During that time, every magnetic instrument within 2 miles had aligned toward the same point below the old torture chamber. 2 technicians had heard voices through disconnected headsets. A thermal camera had recorded 6 human figures walking through a sealed wall. The figures had no body heat, but something behind them did. We entered through a service passage behind the old torture chamber. Part of the rear wall had collapsed during the previous night, revealing a narrow staircase descending at an angle no survey had recorded. The first steps were medieval. The next section was older, formed from rough stone blocks blackened by smoke. 20 meters below, the construction changed again. The walls became smooth, tightly fitted, and almost untouched by age. No mortar, no tool marks, no sign that human hands had shaped them. The air grew colder, but there was no movement, no damp, and no natural sound. Even our breathing seemed to stop at the edge of the darkness ahead. The first symbol appeared beside a sealed archway, a circle crossed by a single straight line. I had seen it before in forgotten tunnels, abandoned chambers, and sealed files connected to Foundation operations across Britain and the Isle of Man. It had appeared near breaches, relics, and places where ordinary rules had failed. Until then, I had assumed it was an early Foundation mark, a warning left by previous teams. Here, it had been carved into stone, older than the castle itself. Further down, the same symbol appeared again and again, positioned above doorways and cut into the floor at regular intervals, like a trail. At the base of the staircase, we entered a vast circular chamber supported by 12 stone columns. Between them stood statues of armored figures. Their armor resembled that of medieval knights, but each carried tools alongside weapons: books, measuring rods, lanterns, surgical instruments, and sealed containers. Their swords were lowered toward the center of the room. There, set into the floor, was an enormous circular slab marked by the same line-through circle symbol. Around its edge were royal crests added in different periods. Some were clear, others had been deliberately erased. Whatever this chamber had been, generations of English rulers had known of it. Behind the northern column, Echo 3 located a stone chest sealed with corroded silver wire. The lock carried no Foundation designation. Inside were rolls of parchment protected by wax, fragments of maps, and a ledger written in several hands across several centuries. The earliest readable entry named the Guardians of the Chamber, the Order of the Crown. Not an army, not a church, and not an order recognized by history. It described a hidden brotherhood formed under royal authority, from knights scholars, physicians, priests, engineers, and witnesses to events the Crown could not publicly acknowledge. Their oath was simple: to investigate, contain, and conceal threats that stood beyond human law and natural understanding. Director Hale appeared on a secure screen carried into the chamber by the technical team. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he ordered all personnel without black level clearance to withdraw. Shaw remained. So did I. Hale admitted that only a handful of senior figures knew the Foundation had not begun in the 20th century. That was merely when the organization adopted its current structure and name. Before the Foundation, there had been the Order of the Crown. Its surviving records had been divided, concealed, and gradually absorbed into modern archives. Most of its history was believed lost. Chillingham, Hale said, was never listed among the known order sites. I asked about the symbol. Hale looked toward the seal beneath our feet and gave the answer I had not expected. The Foundation had not created it. The symbol used in old documents, on restricted doors, and within containment facilities had been inherited from the Order. Its meaning had been reduced over time to a general mark of authority. Almost no one remembered what it originally represented. The Order believed the circle was the boundary of the known world. The line was the barrier that held something outside it, a seal, a warning, a command to hold the breach closed. One of them appeared at the chamber entrance, wearing the shape of a young boy, pale face, dark eyes, period clothing. The image matched one of the castle's most famous apparitions. It took 3 steps toward me and stopped. Its features shifted almost invisibly, as though corrected by an unseen hand. The face became older, then younger, then briefly took on my own eyes. The temperature did not change around it. No emotional response registered on the instruments. It was not a surviving human consciousness. It was a void mimic using the memory of a ghost as camouflage. Foundation analysis confirmed the impossible. Chillingham contained residual echoes created by repeated violence. It contained bound spirits, genuine human consciousness surviving after death. It contained void mimics crossing through a weakened boundary and copying those spirits. Beneath them all was a Class 4 boundary manifestation centered below the ancient chamber. Every major haunting classification existed in the same location, overlapping and feeding the legend that had protected the truth for centuries. Tourists came expecting ghosts. The stories kept them looking upward, while the real danger waited below. Cracks began spreading across the seal. The statues trembled. One by one, their lowered swords shifted deeper into narrow slots surrounding the central slab. They were not memorials. They were part of the mechanism. The Order had built the entire chamber as a containment machine. 12 guardians, 12 locks. Each statue held the seal in place through a system hidden beneath the floor. Beneath the medieval carving, I found a second version of the mark. The circle was incomplete. The line did not cross through its center. It stood between the broken ends, holding them apart. The meaning was suddenly clear. The circle did not represent a prison. It represented reality under pressure. The line was not a weapon or a royal sign. It was the boundary itself, the final division between our world and whatever existed beyond it. The modern Foundation had turned an ancient warning into an emblem without understanding the message. The presence struck the seal again. One of the statues split across the chest, and its sword, rose from the locking channel. Darkness spilled through the gap beneath the slab like smoke moving against gravity. Shapes formed inside it. Soldiers, children, prisoners, members of our own team. The mimics were no longer entering one at a time. They were being pushed through together. The chamber filled with faces borrowed from the castle's dead. I found the activation instructions hidden in the margin of the ledger. The mechanism required living witnesses at the surviving locks, each holding the sword of a guardian in place, while the central line was restored. The order had described it as an oath renewed through action. Shaw assigned the team across the chamber. Operators forced the remaining swords downward as the stone fought against them. I reached the damaged central channel and placed the broken section of the original silver seal into the groove. The line across the central circle closed. The darkness was dragged back beneath the slab. One by one, the imitations folded inward and vanished. The bound spirits remained for a moment longer. Among them stood men and women, wearing the robes and armor of the Order of the Crown. They did not attack. They watched as the mechanism returned to life. One of them placed a hand over his heart, then faded with the others. The last sound in the chamber was the click of 12 locks settling into place. Before leaving, I examined the rear of one of the statues. Hidden beneath centuries of dust was a carved map of Britain marked with circles. Chillingham was only one of them. Several locations matched previous Foundation cases. Others had never appeared in any modern file. Beside the map were additional symbols unlike anything in our database. The circle and line was only the first. Hale ordered the chamber erased from general records. He said the Foundation could survive the discovery of an older organization. What it could not survive was proof that the Order of the Crown had inherited its mission from something older still. As the secure feed ended, he left me with one final instruction. Do not search for the other sites. The Order of the Crown had laid the foundations of the organization we served. But it had not begun the work. It had inherited it. And somewhere beneath Britain, other seals were waiting, watched over by forgotten guardians, marked by symbols no living director could explain. Behind me, deep below the castle, stone shifted once in the darkness. Then something breathed. The sound did not come from beneath the repaired seal. It came from behind the chamber wall. Every instrument in the room registered the same impossible result. The stone surface was solid, nearly 4 meters thick, yet the acoustic sensors detected an open space beyond it. Something large was moving inside that space, slowly dragging itself across stone. Shaw ordered the team back into defensive positions while I examined the symbols carved beside the hidden map. One of them had begun to glow with a faint amber light, the same color that appeared beneath the scar on my arm whenever reality weakened around me. The pain arrived a moment later. Heat spread through the old scar as though a wire had been pulled beneath my skin. The mark had reacted to breaches before, but never with such precision. It was not pointing towards the seal in the floor. It was drawing me toward the wall. When I moved left, the burning eased. When I stepped toward the glowing symbol, it intensified. Whatever had marked me during the earlier Foundation cases recognized something behind that stone. Echo 3 located a narrow vertical seam hidden between 2 columns. There was no handle, lock, or mechanism visible from the chamber. The ledger described 12 guardians, but the room contained 13 carved figures. The final statue had been built into the wall itself, almost completely concealed by later masonry. It wore no medieval armor. Its head was covered by a smooth stone mask, and both hands were pressed against the circular emblem carved into its chest. The line through that circle had been deliberately broken. Hale returned to the secure channel before we touched it. His voice was quieter now. He ordered Shaw to seal the chamber and withdraw. There was no discussion of evidence, no request for further readings, and no attempt to disguise his concern. He knew what the 13th Guardian represented. When I challenged him, Hale finally admitted that fragments of the Order's oldest records referred to a figure called the First Warden. It was never identified as human. The Order did not worship it, but they believed it had taught their founders how to repair the boundaries between worlds. The First Warden had appeared during the reign of a king whose name had been removed from every surviving document. It arrived wounded, carrying knowledge of breaches that had opened long before recorded history. According to the fragments, it showed the Order how to build locks, recognize mimics, and distinguish true spirits from things wearing the dead. Then it disappeared beneath Chillingham. The Crown declared the chamber sealed, and every witness was sworn to silence. The Foundation had always assumed the story was symbolic. Hale no longer believed that. He warned us that the chamber beneath the wall might not be a prison. It might be a refuge. If the First Warden still existed, opening the passage could expose the Foundation to the oldest intelligence it had ever encountered. It could also reveal why the Order of the Crown had been created in the first place. The decision was taken from us when the castle shook. Dust fell from the ceiling, the central seal groaned, and a new crack opened across the floor. The breach below had not been closed. It had only been stabilized. Something on the other side was pressing against it with increasing force. At the same moment, the hidden statue turned its stone head toward me. The movement was slow and deliberate. The face beneath the mask remained unreadable, but the circle on its chest brightened. A line of light traveled from the emblem into the surrounding wall, tracing an outline that had been invisible moments earlier. The stone withdrew in sections, revealing a passage descending into absolute darkness. Cold air rushed from it, carrying the smell of iron, dust, and something ancient enough to have no name. Shaw requested reinforcements. None could reach us before the pressure beneath the seal exceeded containment limits. We had two choices: abandon the chamber and allow the breach to reopen, or enter the hidden passage and search for whatever mechanism the First Warden had used to control it. Hale opposed both. Then the secure connection failed. Every Foundation channel inside the castle went silent. We entered with 6 operators, leaving the remaining team to hold the 12 swords in position around the seal. The passage descended in a wide spiral. Unlike the chamber above, its walls were not built from individual stones. They appeared to have been cut from a single mass of black rock. Images covered the surface, but they were not carvings. They moved beneath the stone like shadows trapped under ice. The images showed settlements from different periods: wooden villages, Roman forts, medieval towns, modern cities. Above each one, the sky was split by the same broken circle. Figures emerged through the openings wearing familiar faces. Some were welcomed as returning relatives. Others were treated as saints, soldiers, or kings. Each scene ended in silence and empty streets. The void mimics had not discovered humanity recently. They had been studying us throughout history. Every culture had given them different names, but the pattern remained unchanged. They crossed through damaged boundaries, copied the dead, and entered communities through grief. The Order of the Crown had not been formed to hunt ghosts. It had been formed to prevent an invasion that used ghosts as camouflage. At the bottom of the spiral, we found a chamber far older than the castle and the Order. A vast ring of dark stone stood upright at its center. A thin, vertical line of pale light divided the empty space within it. The original symbol was not a drawing. It was a representation of this machine. The circle was a gateway. The line was the barrier holding it closed. A figure sat beneath the ring, fixed to the floor by metal restraints that disappeared into the stone. It was tall, thin, and wrapped in the remains of dark ceremonial armor. Its face was hidden behind the same smooth mask worn by the 13th statue. Cables or roots extended from its body into the ring and the foundations above. Each pulse of light traveled through it, maintaining the barrier. The First Warden had never left Chillingham. It had been holding the breach closed for centuries. Its head lifted as we approached. The voice did not come from its mouth. It entered every headset at once, speaking in a language none of us knew, but all of us understood. It said the lock was failing because the guardians above had forgotten the oath. The Order had renewed the mechanism through each generation. When the Foundation abandoned the old traditions, it continued the investigations, but neglected the duty that had made those investigations possible. I told it the Foundation had restored the seal. The Warden answered that we had repaired only the outer lock. Beyond the ring, something had awakened. Not a mimic, not a spirit, not a boundary manifestation. The force beneath Chillingham belonged to no existing Foundation classification. Class 5 had never meant unknown because the Foundation lacked information. It meant knowledge restricted from almost everyone inside the organization. The Warden showed us an image through the ring. For less than a second, the darkness beyond the barrier cleared. I saw a landscape without sky, filled with structures that seemed to bend away from observation. Countless figures stood facing the gateway. None wore human forms. At their center was something so vast that the others appeared insignificant beside it. The moment it turned toward us, the pale line across the ring began to fracture. The Warden ordered us to renew the compact. One living representative of the organization had to accept responsibility for the seal, just as members of the Order had done for centuries. It was not a sacrifice of life. It was an oath binding the Foundation to every site protected by the original symbol. Accepting it would reactivate seals across Britain, but it would also reveal their locations to whatever waited beyond them. Shaw argued that no individual had authority to commit the entire Foundation. The Warden replied that authority had never protected the boundary. Responsibility had. The pressure increased. Above us, the operators reported that the Guardian swords were being forced from their channels. Mimics filled the castle corridors, using the faces of tourists, soldiers, children, and Foundation personnel. We had seconds before the outer chamber failed. I placed my hand against the line of light. The scar on my arm burned white. Images entered my mind. Hidden chambers beneath churches, tunnels below ancient hills, sealed doors on the Isle of Man, and forgotten outposts buried beneath modern cities. At every location, the same circle and line emblem began to glow. The Order of the Crown had not simply left records behind, it had created a network. I repeated the words transmitted by the warden. Hold the gate. Protect the realm. Tell no one. The line inside the ring became whole. A shockwave traveled through the chamber, throwing us to the ground. Above, the 12 guardian swords locked into place. Every mimic inside Chillingham vanished at the same instant. The residual echoes stopped. The bound spirits turned toward the ground as though hearing a distant call, then slowly faded from sight. The First Warden released a final breath. The restraints around its body opened, and the cables connecting it to the ring fell still. For the first time in centuries, the barrier no longer depended upon it. The burden had passed to the organization that had inherited the Order's work. Before the warden died, it reached toward my arm. A new shape appeared beside the scar, a small circle divided by a single line. It warned me that the mark was not a reward. It was a key. The network would recognize me now, and so would the things pressing against it. When communications returned, Hale ordered us to remain silent until a containment council could be assembled. He already knew what I had done. Across the country, dormant Foundation instruments had activated inside locations the organization did not know it possessed. Doors sealed for centuries had begun transmitting signals. Files previously unreadable were opening on their own. The Foundation had spent generations believing it was building a system of investigation and containment. In truth, it had been occupying the ruins of one. The Order of the Crown had laid the foundations, but even they had inherited the work from guardians whose names were lost before England existed. Chillingham Castle was reclassified and placed under permanent Foundation control. Public tours continued after a short closure blamed on structural repairs. Visitors still reported footsteps, voices, and figures moving through the corridors. Some were residual memories, some were genuine spirits. Others could not be confirmed. The official report recorded the breach as stable. The Order Chamber was removed from all accessible maps. Knowledge of its original name was restricted to director level and above. Most Foundation personnel would never learn that the symbol on their facilities belonged to an organization centuries older than their own. But I knew. The circle was the gate, the line was the boundary. And beneath Chillingham, the first seal had recognized a new guardian. 3 nights after the operation, Hale sent me a single image recovered from a Foundation satellite. Across Britain and the Isle of Man, 13 points were emitting the same faint signal. 12 were stationary. The 13th was moving.